Chapter 8. The last night. Okay. Now, in case you get confused, okay, this is the final narrative chapter. Okay, this is the end of the story. Chapter 9 is a letter from Dr. Lanyon, the one that's in the safe. Chapter 10 is a letter from Dr. Jekyll, which he gives him at the end of chapter 8. So this is the end of the story. Okay, you happy with that? This is the last chapter, the last night. Now I would say, when I says the last night, I would question, whose last night? Hyde, Jekyll, Utterson. But somebody is going to die. Somebody is going to die, I would suggest. Mr. Utterson was sitting by his fireside one evening after dinner when he was surprised to receive a visit from Paul. Who's Paul? He's Jekyll's butler, ain't he? Jekyll's butler. Bless me, Paul. What brings you here? He cried. I didn't really cry like that, I should do that again. Bless me, Paul, what brings you here? He cried. Then taking a second to look at him, what ails you? Right? An ailment is what's wrong? Is the doctor ill? Oh, Mr. Utterson, said the man, there is something wrong. Okay. Drama. This is maybe the most dramatic chapter, right? Take a seat. And here is a glass of wine for you. Always got the old wine out. Doesn't do that very often, did he? Only when Mr. Guest come round. Said the lawyer, now take your time. Tell me plainly what you want. You know the doctor's way, sir, replied Paul, and how he shuts himself up. Well, he's shut up again in the cabinet, and I don't like it, sir. Sir, I wish I may die if I like it. Mr. Utterson, sir, I'm afraid. Okay, shuts himself up. He shut himself up in the cabinet. Remember, the cabinet is the little room above the lab. I don't like it, sir. I don't like it. If I to say I like it would be, I wish I'd rather die than say I liked it. Now, my good man, said the lawyer, be explicit. What are you afraid of? Now what are you afraid of? This is very uncommon. So he's saying essentially, be straight with me, right? Stop talking in riddles. This is a man who spends all of his time talking in riddles, isn't it? Oh, I've been afraid for about a week, returned Paul, doggedly disregarding the question. I can bear it no more. The man's appearance bore out his words. His manner was altered for the worse, and except for the moment when he had first announced his terror, he had not once looked at the lawyer in the face. Even now, he sat with his glass of wine untasted on his knee, and his eyes directed to the corner of the floor. I can bear it no more, he repeated. So clearly, Jekyll's behaviour is worrying. Now, of course, Utterson hasn't seen him in ages, but now his butler is like, I can't take it anymore. I'm scared. What are you scared of? I can't tell you, right? Come, said the lawyer. I see you have some good reason, Paul. I see there is something seriously amiss. Yeah, well done, mate. Right? I see there's something seriously amiss. Try to tell me what it is. I think there's been foul play, said Paul hoarsely. Foul play, so a crime. Foul play? Cried the lawyer, a good deal frightened and rather inclined to be irritated in consequence. What foul play? What does the man mean? I didn't say, sir. But if you will come along with me and see it for yourself. Ooh, right. It's too bad. I can't tell you how bad it is. You got to come yourself and see yourself. Mr. Utterson's only answer was to rise and get his hat. I like he always gets his hat. Right? Remember, in those days, a man without a hat wasn't no man. Right? Of course, his hat and greatcoat. But he observed with wonder the greatness of the relief that appeared on the butler's face, and perhaps with no less that the wine was still untasted when he set it down to follow. This is quite good for prophetic fallacy, right? It was a wild, cold, seasonable night of March. Okay, so March, of course, is still the end of winter, with pale moon lying on her back as though the wind had tilted her. So the moon is like this in the sky. And a flying rack of the most diaphanous and lawny texture. The wind made talking difficult. The flecked blood into the face. So it's windy, so it's dark, it's windy, dark. The moon is not making much light. It seemed to have swept the streets unusually bare of passengers. Besides, so the streets are bare. Utterson thought he had never seen that part of London so deserted. Okay, so it's creepy. He could have wished it otherwise. Never in his life had he been conscious of so sharp a wish to see and touch his fellow creatures. For struggle as he might, there was borne upon his mind a crushing anticipation of calamity. So he's scared, right? This guy said, I'm scared, Utterson, right? What's wrong? Come and see for yourself. So he's walking through the streets, it's cold, it's windy, no one's around, and he has this feeling of doom, that he's walking in something terrible. The square, when they got there, was all full of wind and dust, and the thin trees in the garden were lashing themselves along the railing. Really windy. Paul, who had kept all the way a pace or two ahead, now pulled up in the middle of the pavement, and in spite of the biting weather, took off his hat, mopped his brow with a red pocket handkerchief. So he's sweating, right? Now it could be that he's too warm, or it could be fear. But for all the hurry of his cowing, these were not the dews of exertion he wiped away. The moisture of some strangling anguish. That's what I just said, wasn't it? I should have just waited. Right? So he's sweating because he's scared. His face was white, and his voice when he spoke, harsh and broken. Well, sir, here we are, and God grant there be nothing wrong. Amen, Paul, said the lawyer. Thereupon the servant knocked in a very guarded manner. The doors opened on the chain. Do you know what it means to have a door on the chain? Right, so the door's been barricaded and locked. And a voice asked from within, Is that you, Paul? It is all right. Paul said, Open the door. The hall, when they entered it, was brightly lighted up. The fire was built high, and about the hearth, the whole of the servants. So the hearth was the fire. So the fire has been made bright, built high, bright. Okay? All the servants are standing around the fire. Men and women stood huddled together like a flock of sheep. At the sight of Mr. Utterson, the housemaid broke into hysterical whimpering, and the cook, crying out, "God bless, it's Mr. Utterson," ran forward and to take him in her arms. Right? So they're scared. Right? What? They're all huddled round the fire. Right? Why are they round the fire? Why are they round the fire? Because they're scared of the dark. Right? Bad things happen in the dark. We don't know why, but they're scared, right? So you've got nice bits like this. You've got the hysterical. To be hysterical means it's uncontrolled, whimpering. What? Are you all here? Said the lawyer peevishly. Very irregular. Very unseemly. Your master will be far from pleased. Right? What a boring old bugger, eh? So they're all there. Oh my God, thank you so much. Oh, Miss Anderson, thank you so much. He's like, what are you all doing here? This is not how it should be. You should be in the kitchen, cook, not here. So even in moments of drama, he's still very sort of like stuck to tradition, right? What the hell's going on? Get in the kitchen. Get out there. They're all afraid, said Paul. Blank silence followed. No one protesting. Only the maid lifted up her voice and now wept loudly. Hold your tongue. Shut up. Right? Hold your tongue, Paul said to her with a ferocity of accent that testified his own jangled nerves. Shut up! Stop crying! And indeed, when the girl had suddenly raised the note of her lamentation, they had all started and turned towards the inner door with faces of dreadful expectation. And now, continued the butler, addressing the knife boy, reach me a candle, and we'll get this through hands at once. Then he begged Mr. Utterson to follow him, and led the way to the back garden. Now, sir, as you come as gently as you can. Okay? So, to be quiet. I want you to hear. I don't want you to be heard. Okay? I don't want you to be heard. So it's trying to build up some tension here, right? As we go into the dark innards of the house. I want you to hear. I don't want you to be heard. And see here, sir, if by any chance he was to ask you in, don't go. Mr. Utterson's nerves at this unlooked for termination gave a jerk that nearly threw him from his balance. But he recollected his courage and followed the butler into the laboratory building and through the surgical theatre with its lumber crates and bottles to the foot of the stair. Here Paul motioned him to stand in one side and listen, while he himself, setting down the candle and making a great and obvious call on his resolution, mounted the steps and knocked with a somewhat uncertain hand on the red bars of the cabinet door. Mr. Utterson, sir. That's not how it goes. Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you, he called. Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you, he called. And even as he did so, once more violently, signed the lawyer to give ear. Okay, so Mr. He's basically got this. This is the door. Utterson, you can be Utterson for me, right? So he's gone. Mr. Utterson's here to see you, sir. This is what's in there, right? Mr. Utterson, sir, asking to see you, he called. And even as he did so, once more violently, signed the lawyer to give ear, to listen. A voice answered from within. Tell him I cannot see anyone! It said complainingly. Thank you, sir, said Paul, with a note of something like triumph in his voice. And taking up his candle, he led Mr. Utterson back across the yard into the great kitchen, where the fire was out and the beetles were leaping on the floor. Sir, he said, looking Mr. Utterson in the eyes, was that my master's voice? It seemed much changed, replied the lawyer, very pale, but giving look for look. Changed? Well, yes, I think so, said the butler. I have been 20 years this man's house. To be deceived about his voice? No, sir. Master's made away with. He was made away with 8 days ago, when we heard him cry out upon the name of God. And who's in there instead of him? And why it stands there is a thing that cries to heaven, Mr. Utterson. So he goes, I've been Jekyll's butler for 20 years, right? I think I know what his voice sounds like. The man in that room is not Mr. Jekyll, Dr. Jekyll. Yeah? He says 8 days ago, Jekyll screamed, and now this other person is in there. So when he says made away with, what he means is, he means killed. Okay, 8 days ago. He says, the voice in there, who's in there instead of him? So there is someone else in the room. There is someone else in the room. This is a very strange tale, Paul. This is a rather wild tale, my man. So he doesn't believe him, right? Strange tale, wild tale. He thinks it's a lie, right? He thinks that it's untrue, right? Utterson, biting his finger. This is very strange, Paul. Suppose it were as you suppose. Supposing Dr. Jekyll to have been, well, murdered, where could you induce the murderer to stay? That won't hold water. It doesn't commend itself to reason. So he says, if you murder somebody, why would you stay in the room where you did the murder? It doesn't make any sense, right? So it doesn't make sense. Well, Mr. Utterson, you're a smart man, Mr. Utterson, right? You're a hard man to satisfy. But I'll do it yet, said Paul. All this last week, you must know, him or it, or whatever it is that lives in that cabinet, he's been crying night and day. This is really important, by the way, for the plot. He's been crying night and day for some sort of medicine and cannot get it into his mind. It was sometimes his way, the master's, that is, to write his orders on a sheet of paper and throw it on the stairs. We had done nothing else back this week, nothing but papers and a closed door. So you get papers and a closed door. And the very meals left there to be smuggled in when no one was looking. So he's locked away. And what he's doing is, he's putting bits of paper out on the steps that say, bring me this, bring me this, bring me this. Then he's hiding. When they leave his meals outside the door, when they go, he brings the food in. So no one sees him. Well, sir, every day, and twice and thrice the same day, there have been orders and complaints. I have been sent flying to all the wholesale chemists in town. So he's after drugs. every time I brought the stuff back, there would be another paper telling me to return it because it was not pure, and another order for a different firm. The drug is wanting bitter bad, sir, whatever for. So the person in the room is after a pure drug, and what happens is he keeps leaving slips of paper out, so it says go to this firm, get me the drug. They bring it, he says it's not good enough, it's not pure enough, try this place, try this place, try this place. He's trying to find a particular drug and he can't find it.
What does it say after below return?
It says after a pure drug. So he says they're not pure enough, right? They're not cut right. Have you any of these papers? Asked Mr. Utterson. What's he going to do with the papers? Probably get his old mate in, eh? Get old guest in. Paul felt in his pocket and handed out a crumpled note, which the lawyer, bending nearer to the candle, carefully examined. Its contents ran thus: Dr. Jekyll presents his compliments to Messrs. Moore. Now, Messrs. Moore is the chemist. This is how they used to write letters back in the day. He assures them that their last sample is impure and quite useless for his present purpose. In the year 18, Dr. J purchased a somewhat large quantity from Messrs. M. He now begs them to search with the most sedulous care, and should any of the same quality be left, to forward it to him at once. Expense is no consideration. So he says any price he will pay. The importance of this, Dr. J, can hardly be exaggerated. Importance. So far the letter had run composedly enough, but there, with a sudden splutter of the pen, the writer's emotion had broken loose. For God's sake, he had added, find me some of the old. So he's desperate. He's desperate for this old one they used to have. They've stopped doing now. This is a strange note, said Mr. Utterson. And then sharply, how do you come to have it open? The man at Moore's was main angry, sir. He threw it back to me like much dirt, returned Paul. This is unquestionably the doctor's hand. Do you know? Resumed the lawyer. I thought it looked like it, said the servant rather sulkily, and then with another voice, but what matters hand of right, he says. I've seen him. Seen him? Repeated Mr. Utterson. Well, that's it, said Paul. It was this way. I came suddenly into the theatre from the garden. It seems he has slipped out to look for this drug, or whatever it is, for the cabinet door was open. And there he was, at the far end of the room, digging among the crates. He looked up when I came in, gave a kind of cry, and whipped upstairs into the cabinet. But it was for 1 minute that I saw him, but the hair stood upon my head like quills. Sir, if that was my master, why had he a mask upon his face? If it was my master, why did he cry out like a rat and run from me? I have served him long enough. And then the man paused and passed his hand over his face. These are all very strange circumstances, said Mr. Utterson. We'll finish this page and we'll stop. But I think I begin to see daylight. Meaning? Truth. Your master, Paul, is plainly seized with one of the maladies that both torture and deform the sufferer. Hence I ought to know. The alteration of his voice, hence the mask and the avoidance of his friends, hence his eagerness to find this drug. by means of which the poor soul retains some hope of ultimate recovery. God grant that he be not deceived. There is my explanation. It is sad enough, Paul, aye, and appalling to consider, but it is plain and natural, hangs well together, and delivers us from all exorbitant alarms. So he basically sticks with reason. So he says here that Jekyll is sick. He says, don't worry, Paul, there is no murder that's happened. He's sick, his voice has changed because he's sick, his face looks weird because he's sick, and he wants to avoid his friends because he's sick. Right? That's what's happened. Everything is fine. Do you think he's right? Well, we will find out on Monday because we have run out of time.